All right, let's pick up on this now. Analysts have sought to highlight that the 2024 national budget will be tabled against a backdrop of economic recovery efforts and possible fiscal slippage. Now, based on this, government expected to continue on a fiscal consolidation path. Business anchor Dumisani Ndlovu is in Cape Town for us, and she joins us live now. Dumisani, good evening to you. Well, compounding the problems for the finance minister is the fact that this year is an election year, and so he's going to have to do lots of appeasing.
Absolutely, Xoli, and a good evening to you and the rest of the viewers from a windy Cape Town at this point. Much is about a balancing act here. You just mentioned the fiscal needs that the finance minister needs to touch on, but also on the demand side of things, the South African economy needs a bit of fixing, if I can put it that way, solely because we are looking at not only a local trajectory of weak economic growth, at the same time the global dynamics do not help South Africa. However, the youth agenda has also taken a turn in terms of the unemployment rate that we saw come out of Stats SA. That number not looking good for South African youth, and that is also an issue that is raised within elections. We are joined now by Youth Capital's Kristal Duncan-Williams to speak more about their expectations this time around. Kristal, thank you so much for your time. I think with the Stats SA release today of the unemployment rate, it was expected that South Africa would regress with the improvements that we had seen recently. But on the side of South African youth, what should they be listening to come tomorrow evening?
I think young people really need to look for a continuation of things like the presidential employment stimulus, which has shown short-term work opportunities for young people, but very recent research shows the long-term impact that even after the program is ended, it increased spending power of young people who were beneficiaries of these programs. So I think these kinds of programs that really benefit young people, we need to see continued funding of these programs. And then additionally, as you just mentioned, young people can equip themselves for the job market as much as they like, but if the economy doesn't grow, if we don't fix our infrastructure problems and see growth there, we aren't going to be able to create the jobs that are needed to dent the 9 million young people who are not in employment, education or training. And so we're really going to be looking out for those, the funding that is going into infrastructure and the progress there, because I think all of us have heard, the infrastructure argument from Sona in the budget speech repeatedly now, but what progress has been made? Because at the end of the day, young people are not seeing any results.
What's to be said then about in particular, the SRD grant that would be for unemployed individuals in South Africa, and we know the majority of those are the youth. Is it nearly enough to even get by based on the research that Youth Capital has done?
We released a report last week, Beyond the Cost, where we spoke to over 10,000 young people to hear about how much it costs them to look for work. And they said on transport alone in a month, they can spend 700 Rand on average. And so no 350 Rand doesn't seem like enough. But we know, again, from our survey, that 3 in 10 young people say that they rely on some kind of grant to fund their job-seeking behavior. So even, at the small amount, young people are using this money to look for work. And so we need to continue with at least the SRD grant in its current state. Obviously, we'd like more money, but we understand that, where's that money going to come from? So as everybody's saying, a real fine balancing act for the minister tomorrow.
What's also interesting with regards to the youth agenda is that come election time and electioneering, it is the youth of South Africa that is almost used as the spoken word tool to spread the message to every other voter. It is quite different, though, with the entrant of new voters that have registered. On that front, what does the minister need to at least say to address that particular cohort of individuals where he might get it right and where he might get it wrong?
I think, as you said, young people could be the real pivot in this election. I think before the last registration weekend, we really thought young people weren't turning out in their numbers, and now they are. And so I think young people themselves need to be looking out for these kinds of plans that speak to their lived realities, right? What can we do in the long term You can have a short-term intervention, a short-term work opportunity, but unless we change the ecosystem in which all of this sits, we're not really changing things for young people. And I think what young people are tired of hearing is, copy and paste answers with youth unemployment, a magic entrepreneurship program, a managed public employment program. These things in and of themselves on their own are not going to solve the crisis. And what the minister needs to do is to understand the nuances that lead to youth unemployment and speak to the layers of all of those barriers if he wants to grab the youth's attention and the youth vote.
As a parting shot, do you find that there is political will currently in South Africa that is addressing the youth in a manner that they want to be addressed? Like you alluded to, the copy and paste model has proven not to work.
I think young people are very frustrated just with the age of the people who represent them in Parliament and the MPs that sit there. We hear that time and time again. Where the youth vote? Even at Sono, we had a watch party going. Young people were saying, look at the average age, these people should be retiring. I think young people find that extremely frustrating, that they just don't see themselves represented in political parties, in decision-making spaces, and when they do, they're in the minority. And I think as we move towards the election, it's time for new blood, it's time for young energy, pass on the knowledge to the next generation so that young people can see themselves in Parliament, as opposed to now where they don't feel connected to anybody who has decisions that really impact their daily lives.
Kristal, Duncan-Williams of the Youth Capital, Xoli, as you've heard there, talking about the youth agenda. What is it that the South African youth need to be paying attention to once the Finance Minister addresses the country, delivering the 2024 National Budget speech tomorrow? And that's where we leave it for this evening as a business desk. But before we do that, a final look at where the markets ended off for the day. It hasn't been a good one. It's all red on the JSE.